João, can you hear me well? Yeah?
Yes, Henrique. Good morning.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us in another session of Effisus Connect to Value. Today I have with me João. João, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Henrique.
And our main topic for today would be facade interfaces. So we'll be looking into more detail into this very specific topic, that is understanding how we should look at this very specific point in our facade, because we all know that facades are made of very I would say continuous layers, but sometimes we have to deal with those interfaces that need a very specific and very different look than those continuous membranes that you have in all over our facade. Just before we start through our presentation, I would like to invite our attendants to be familiar with our chat that we have available. So we have a Q&A chat box. So we have just an icon on the top or side of your screen where you can just that you can use in order to place any question that you find valuable for this session. So please feel free to do so, as we'll be more than happy to answer to those questions. So João, if you feel comfortable having something during the presentation, please feel free to do so as well, because that will also have color to it. So I would first just would like to share some images that I think are interesting in order to kick the ball in this presentation, because we normally talk about interfaces as a very general concept, but what are really the interfaces when we are discussing about the facade interface? So for instance, we can have, and you know that the facade industry is pretty much heading to this kind of new technology and off-site construction. So we are nowadays really used to find this kind of situation. So modular installations, so pretty much modulars or panels that are made off-site and that just get to the site already done, so already performed. So we just have to put it in place. But even there, you have interfaces to deal with. You have interfaces to deal at the bottom floor, at the top floor. So just connection with the roofing, for instance, when you have an interface with a different kind of facade. For instance, if you change from a unit-type system to a range screen cladding, so we'll have many situations even with this in this typology of facade. But you can also find this kind of connections here. So floor to floor, you may have a connections between windows and the slab, for instance, or windows and the opaque facade. So in this case, it's the rain screen cladding, and you'll just adhering our window to the CP board or to the silicate board. So the sheeting board, you just need to do this kind of interfaces, or sometimes you need to deal with the coping, because you have always to do a connection of your facade, a connection of your facade to the roofing membrane. And so there's no way of doing this without an interface in order to get a complete waterproofing system in the full envelope of the building. And then, for instance, here is just a connection with an existing building. So when you are introducing a new facade system, you always need, of course, to make a perfect and efficient connection with the ones that are already there, with the building that is already there. So after seeing these kind of situations that we may find on a job site, for instance, I like to bring to this presentation some discussion and some maybe to challenge ourselves to think a little bit more about what are the main requirements when we're dealing with the interfaces on a facade. And so this is a pretty nice image of rain-free cladding, for instance, facades, and we can see many windows, balconies, many different shapes. So interfaces are there for sure, and we need to take care of them. But when we have a very nice looking building like this one, what are exactly the requirements that we should take into consideration when designing or developing interface performance? So water, air, and vapor are for sure one of our priorities. And of course, when we're dealing with interfaces, membranes, we're looking into keeping the water outside the building envelope. So this is no more than creating a water layer, a continuous water layer, and then interfaces will be playing a very important job, very important role when making these interface. That's no other word for that. So from the window to the continuous layer of the facade, to the bridal membrane, to the CP board, to the concrete. So interfaces will of course need to be waterproof and have also air and vapor performance. UV exposure, because sometimes you have these interfaces fully exposed during the building life. Sometimes it is just during the construction phase, but you need to have this and to take this into consideration, of course. Otherwise, you can have your product failing because of the lack of components or performance when exposed to UV. It could be cracking or drying out sooner than expected. Then dimensions, of course, we need to understand what's the gap width, how it will be, how much we need to bond it to each surface. So we need to be very careful when choosing the membranes, for instance, that we'll be using in this kind of interfaces as a membrane that is smaller than should be, could of course generate a big problem at site. And we know that sometimes it's not easy to change to a wider membrane in the right moment that you are installing. Sometimes that's a lack of product availability. Sometimes that membrane is only available in that width. So we need to be very careful on that as well. Compatibilities, of course, we need to understand in what materials will be adhering our membranes to. So concrete, window, metal, the CP board, the roofing membrane, glass. So wherever you find at site, you need to take this into consideration when you are choosing how we will deal with your interfaces. How easy is access during installation? Because we cannot only choose our solution based on a paper or how the interface should be done or what's the width that you have available to bond the membrane. No, we really need to understand how it will be installed at site. And it's really important to help people on site reducing the risk during the installation. So for instance, reducing the risk of committing any errors in terms of using wrong accessories, imagine that you are dealing with an interface where it's really it's a really narrow space and you're finding really difficult to play with the membranes, cutting, overlapping, etc. It's really important that people on site get a solution that is able to be installed in that specific condition. And we cannot tell ourselves that there's no such solutions, because there are. and you just need to understand the specific situation in order to get the best solution for that specific purpose. Then similarity between details. This means that a project that has 100 windows all the same should have a different approach than a project that has many windows, all different, different size, different, or projecting a different way from the facade. So these are important also to decide which solution to adopt. Fire is a really discussed topic nowadays, so of course we should put these requirements in this range of performances that we are just looking at, that these considerations that we are just putting on the paper. So fire, we know that in many countries B classification is being required for many issues, so we just need to understand each project and how a very specific membrane that is installed will affect the performance of fire of the building as a whole, and many others, of course. So this mainly to highlight, and I hope that I was able to do this, to make everyone aware that interfaces are not a simple detail, are not a straight forward detail as every building is the same. No, we should actually take into consideration some of these points in order to design correctly our facade interface.
Hey, before we go moving forward, we just have a chat comment here asking, how about movements? So I think it's mentioned structural movements that is also expected between those interfaces. So later on, we'll be discussing more about the solution for these interfaces. Of course, we need to fulfill this gap or these movements, the structural movement, having a flexible material to sustain these movements when it's required. In most of the case, it is.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, João. Indeed, movement is something that we need to take also into consideration, and it's something that sometimes people are not actually able to say what will be the movements of that interface, but it is really important to understand how the facade will work, how all these different parts of the facade will cooperate or will move, but in comparison, in the relation with themselves. So and as we were saying, João, we'll have very or really good solutions for this kind of situations where we have large movements. But I will just about to highlighting some of these pictures because making sure that people are aware of these kind of problems that very usual actually happen on a facade scheme. So lack of adherence of some membranes. So for instance, compatibility problems. Some membrane is going to site and just standard membrane, and people on site just notice that it's not adhering well. Some specific details, and as you can see, this is not as a detail that we usually don't see at site. So this is a very current detail. So we have two windows and just the need of playing with the membrane in the middle of them, and the difficulty sometimes that is on the paper that seems pretty easy. Actually on site it turns into a mess, into a difficult point to deal with. And so you have different situations where you can see lack of adherence, so design failures, installation failures, so water just retained on there. But this to make you aware that interfaces are not as simple as it may seem at the beginning. And so how we see the market nowadays. We call it standard market as the market is operating currently. That is, we have factories and we have manufacturers just producing some specific products, and they're delivering these products to the customers, to the site, and they're reaching the site as standard membranes, as standard products, standard width, and there's no way of the site itself, the site or the people at site or the designers go back and try to get an improvement of these solutions to their site. So they may find some difficulties at site, but they normally deal with them with their own hands. So we have a plain membrane, we have a difficult window to seal, then we just need to do some extra cuts and splicing, and we'll have to deal with that way. In Effisus, we really understand this in a different way. We call it Effisus methodology, that is enabling this kind of interactive dialogue. So we really understand that without this interactive dialogue, in a one-way interaction like this, you won't have the chance to improve your installation at site and the efficiency of your solution. So we need to open ourselves to the customer requirements, and we need to try, and we try every day to get as much information as we can from the site, from the design stage, in order to develop and to bring to every project solutions that are specifically developed for that project. And sometimes it is still standard solutions, but the ones that fit better the project requirements. So this is how we operate. This is an EPDM, and so this is some of the features from the EPDM. I would ask João if you can just share some of the main features of the EPDM. We know that EPDM is a product quite known on the market. Could you please just highlight some of these features, please?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, most of the people are aware about EPDMs. It's a material that's been largely applied. Firstly, it's a rubber material. It's been applied largely in roofing. And later on, we adapted this to this type of interfaces. So it's a material that's over a 50-year life expectancy. And we mentioned life expectancy. In this case, we also have data that proving that this is not based on accelerated or aging tested. So it's been in the market for over 50 years. It's a very stretchable, it has an elongation up to 400%, so very flexible materials. It remains in different temperature service between -40 to up to 100 degrees. Mainly, it's known by being this durability, but of course, it's water resistant, so it's 100% waterproof. Even being exposed, it's highly resistant to UV. So those are the main characteristics when it comes to APDM. In this case, we call it Effisus ACO Facade.
Okay, thank you very much, João. And there's been a lot of discussion about EPDM, should they keep being used or not? And our answer, in our opinion, is yes. So EPDM are still a need for the project requirements. So we should not avoid in a very, I would say, without the space or the time to think properly, we should not avoid the use of EPDM on our project. As João was highlighting, very interesting features on EPDMs, and we can even customize them pretty much as we're showing this in this scheme. So as a really bottom level, we have the standard roles. So as the market is used to, so providing standard width, standard thickness, standard dimensions, and people on site at factory just use them as they want, cutting, slicing, so everything as they need. But we can also customize this into an unlimited width, what means that people on site can have the width that they want to have, so they don't have to use some 3 or 4 dimensions that are available. We can fully customize the width that you need. Then we can also provide the membrane with incorporated self-adhesive bands, which means that you can just apply the membrane on the smooth surfaces without the need of using any glue. So pretty much clean, easy, fast way of installing the product. We can also have the membrane with a clip-in gasket on the edge. So this is a vulcanized clip-in gasket, and we'll have the chance of looking into this kind of solution later on this presentation. But it's really good in terms of efficiency and time to install. And then we can have more customized solutions, more solutions that are performed to each project, like the prefab corners, in order to avoid very important leakage points. Prefab frames, so providing almost finished, complete, and without any need of cutting and overlapping solutions. Prefab 3D, so something that you can have on your site, on your project, without the need of doing any kind of detailing with the membrane, but you can just have for a very specific and challenging detail so 100% customized solution that just fit into the proposed, into the detail, and going until full customization all the way. This pyramid will be adding value, of course, as this is the most customizable solution that we may have. Here we can have, we have some pictures about the ACO Facade P6. That is our membrane with a clipping gasket. You want just sharing some information with our attendants about this solution, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we saw back in the pyramid, we have many different solutions. Today, when it comes to customization and just different level of customization of this product, we decided to start it already with the P6, which, as you see, and as Enrique mentioned, is a PDM membrane with a clipping gasket. In this case, what we do is actually analyze the type of groove that the window has. And then we were able to provide, we send just a couple of drawings, sketches of the actual groove itself. And what we do is attach a clip-in on the membrane. In this case, we have over 100 typology already registered in our database. So this is quite easy for the installation. You don't require any type of adhesive or pasta adhesive or tape in this case, since how it will be attached on the window frame, on the metal frame. It has the exact compatibility, so it's quite tight, as you see here in the picture. This is trying to remove it, and assure the completely sealed of this type of this specific point, this type of interfaces. Again, pretty much that we need from the client side is there's actually typology we analyze. In this case, since we have many already in stock, we send just a couple samples for the client, and they try to see how actually it fits. So quite simple and very effective solution.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, indeed, a really important solution to know about. But we can also have so not only customization on the edges of the membrane, but we can also make these very specific solutions, as we can see here. Really, I think easy to understand that we have here a corner, so a prefabricated corner, so something that reached the site already with this shape. And why this is so important? As you can understand, so if you have a very good membrane with, for instance, a clip-in gasket, something like that, and you're just able to make a perfect connection with the window, perfect connection with the substrate, the concrete, the CP board, you might find some difficulty when you just reach the corner, and you know that in every window we have 4 corners at least, and so we can and we may find some difficulties here because we just need to cut, and this will be a weak point, as you for sure understand. So some part of the membrane have to move straight forward to here. The other part will turn into the top of the window here, and the membrane that comes from the horizontal will do the same, exactly the same way, and then you have a leakage point here. And how can you deal with this kind of leakage point? You'll just apply more glue or more standard membrane, having the need to cut again. So everything on layers and layers of membrane, just trying to cover this weak point. Another way of doing this is this very clean and efficient way. So just providing a piece of membrane that has already the shape of the corner that you need to seal, and doing so, you'll avoid any leakage possibility in this very specific point, and important point, of course, as you just need to apply a piece of adhesive on the back of the corner, or even the corner can be provided with self-adhesive bands already on its back. So it's really easy to install. But here we actually looking at the most standard situation we can have when dealing with the corners. So even in your most standard window, you'll have weak points every time. But we can also develop different kinds of corners in EPDM, and you have here some examples. So this one is really customized to a very specific project. So we can, and we are available and more than happy to do so, to look into your project details and to get from there the most suitable solutions for your project. So sometimes you will understand that the shape of your windows, the complexity of your installation would benefit from a more customized solution for your project. And when it's with corners, this really happening many times. So we can have so easy parts of the window to play with that are quite simple to install and to avoid any issue. But when you have different corners, as you see in here or in there or in there, we'll have a different approach, different possible approach, but we'll have the possibility of having a very specific and that covers the full requirements of the project. And just moving into even a higher level of customization, we can have these prefab frames. Isn't that, João? Would you like to share some words with attendees, please?
Yes, Henrique. So as you mentioned about the corners, so the goal here is obviously to improve the installation, to delivers the quality of installation itself, and of course minimizing those type of tasks. It's a matter of cutting, gluing at site. That's why we come up with those prefabrication, this type of pieces for interfaces. So same thing that we do for the corners, we can actually do for a whole frame. That's what we do, prefabricated frames. In this case, we can do half a frame or a top right, top left. This could be, again, depending on the project itself. But it's important here to see the possibility. This is all to optimize this type of works. When it comes to quantity, in Henrique, it's important to mention we don't have this type of limitation. Of course, as much quantities you have or as much windows you have to seal, this is, of course, the price will change. If you have just 10 windows or something, of course, this is something that we do not recommend. But in some projects, hundreds of windows, this is something that we completely recommend, because in this case you can have different stage to the applications. Sometimes it's even installed at factory and already the frame, and once you get that side, all you need to do, as Henrique was saying, you only apply a bit of adhesive to the concrete. In other cases, it could be installed at site and you do the same task here. So again, just to try to optimize this type of works. And it could be different configurations. This is completely on the project aspect.
Yeah, so another tool that we have available in order to provide a solution to your project. So please feel free to share project details. Sometimes we we can have even more complex details. So we have until now looking into linear interfaces, so windows, roofing, etc. But we can also have this kind of perforations on a facade, and also in this kind of perforations you may find movement, water, so everything that we've been discussing so far, but also adding some additional complexity to these situations. For instance, here it's a pretty much used solution nowadays. So prefab balconies just being fit into these beams here, into these arms that just perforate the facade in here. So all these interface in here, all these connection to the facade should be, of course, properly sealed. And one of the main difficulties that we find in here, just not talking about the complexity of the details of the shape of it, but the lack of space. So and imagining that people need to install this so hanging on the facade, on the outside of the facade, so really difficult to have a proper stability and a proper space to work on this kind of details. And we are aware of this, and that's why we bring and we study this kind of questions with our partners and clients. And so, for instance, in here, we are able to develop solutions that are prefabricated. So, for instance, like this sleeve, but with an open with a joint, or able to have different angles, different shapes, and in a way that people can just bring that solution to that specific point, fit them in, all around the beam, for instance, and apply a single bit of glue, of adhesive, just on the back of the membrane in order to guarantee a permanent and continuous sealing all around it. But imagine doing this with plain membrane, just having to cut in every corner, and we will be here talking about very little dimensions. So we have like 10, sometimes 20 centimeters here, and imagine hanging on the facade with plain membrane with a scissor on your hand, and you just cut it into different pieces. Just try to find the best width to work with it, and just cut and apply more glue and splice and try to make everything stay in place and fit that very specific purpose. So I would say that would be impossible to do in a way that you just finish your job and tell, okay, this is perfectly done, and this will not have any leakage spot. And so we really look into these kind of situations as a very specific and demanding situations, but also very important. And here, João, we have a very specific project, right, where we were able to give this kind of really customized solution.
Yeah, so here it's, when it comes to full customization, this is the type of pieces that we can actually make using our technology. This was a Norman Foster project in Madrid. This is ongoing, as you see on the picture. And here is quite interesting because you have this sort of a crossing interface session. And again, it will be really, really difficult to seal this type of interfaces. As you see in the picture, since it's X or V shape, and you have many, many different weak points between these interfaces. And again, doing this at site, since it's so many interfaces, in the end, this matter of overlapping, this matter of cutting glue, we'll see actually doing it as a standard way, just a ball of adhesive on the middle of each intersection. And it will not fulfill the actual goal of having a PDM membrane, this type of interface, which allows having elongation, a waterproof solution. So what we did is, this is important to understand just this process, how it actually works when it comes to full customization. What we need from the client side is, of course, the standard drawings to analyze each detail. We go deeply in this in a very early stage. So this is why it's important to get involved in this previous stage, in this conceptual phase, to actually understand. In this case, this is a client that already know the possibilities, know that we do actually have this technology available. They approach us and they say, oh, we have this very interesting project. And we analyzed, we made a couple of mock-ups to go for 3D detailing to actually see. And again, here, as you see, we have many different interfaces, but in the end, we're just a matter of 4 typology of pieces. So again, not a very huge quantity. This was less than 100, I think. So we were able to do this, and they're very happy. And again, this is the important thing in Hiki to highlight, is the possibility, is to know that this is available. Most of the people that we talk to, we always like to bring this type of pieces, especially this case, because they do not know that this is available. From the architects that are watching, for the facade contractors or facade designers, this is important to see when it comes to specifications, to understand that we actually need prefab pieces for seal this type of interfaces. Again, not all projects will require this level of customization, but I think of all the solutions that we mentioned here today, we can take at least advantage of one of them. Again, this is depending on the project itself. In this case, I think it was a must.
Okay, thank you very much, Will. Just in a way of connecting all these different solutions that we have. So we have our own consulting department. So this is something that you are able to access in order to get some support from our side, some guidance. So different technologies available. Yes, we have been sharing that, but how can we use that technology in service of my own project? So you, again, you are more than welcome to reach us in order to get this full guidance and consultancy. So you can see in here some of the details that will be developing for different projects. So each project has different requirements. Each interface has different dimensions, different things to be considered. And so we really like to analyze and to discuss every project as a single one. And that's what we've been doing in our consulting department, okay? So please feel free to get to us in order to get this kind of information. So just about to finish, some highlights on this importance of detailing interfaces. So of course, when we are detailing about interfaces, we are making sure that we'll meet the project requirements. So we'll not think about things only at site, and we'll be understanding the project requirements and being able to provide and to discuss the best solutions to that project. And of course, ensuring all compatibilities and allowing the possibility of delivering a proper training prior to installation, which means that if you have information prior to the project start installing, you are able to use that information at your favor in order to develop guidelines and instructions to the site. And that way you'll be, of course, avoiding errors at site and design faults, and also material waste, as you'll be predicting more easy ways of installing without the use of, for instance, glue. That is a material that has a lot of deviation from the budget, and in a whole way we are improving the facade efficiency, of course. So just about to finish, but I would like just to grab your attention to a very specific thing. That is, if you like this presentation, or if you think that something should be added to these sessions that we have, we please request your feedback so feedback from your side. It's really appreciated, as we are delivering these sessions every day with different topics being discussed. So we really find this as a very useful platform between ourselves and our partners. So I would please request just your feedback. So just a few words about this presentation, as we will for sure use them to bring more value to those. And so just finishing, I would like to thank João for being with me here today. And hope to see you again in another Connect to Value session.